June 1st, 2024 is going to be etched into the annals of Ukrainian military history. Yesterday, Ukraine performed an audacious attack on the Russian strategic bomber fleet deep inside Russia. I mean, really, it's about, I looked at the map, 4,000 kilometers from here, and they did it with a lot of ingenuity and a big impact. They claim that they have eliminated about 1/3 of Russia's strategic bomber fleet, that they hit 40 Russian military aircraft when they were on their airfields in Siberia, north of Mongolia. Man, it's like half a continent away. So pretty insane result for Ukraine. It took well over a year of planning, they are claiming. So what does all this mean for the trajectory of the Russo-Ukrainian war? Привit, my name is Connor Klein and welcome to Geopolitics with Connor Klein. I have a background in international relations. I've been living here in Ukraine. I'm in Lviv at the moment. Been here for many years, speak both Ukrainian and Russian. So I'm here to give you a little bit more of an insightful and unique perspective on what has been happening. So Russia uses primarily the strategic bomber fleet to fire rockets at us here in Ukraine from a very safe distance, because Ukrainians are unable to shoot down these aircraft once they are way behind the front lines. They're normally firing these rockets from many hundreds of kilometers away, and Ukrainian air defenses can't do much about it. They can try and just shoot down the rockets that rain down here in Ukraine. But of course, hitting the source is a lot more effective method of eliminating or reducing the problem. So basically what the Ukrainians did yesterday is they used FPV drones that they smuggled into Russia, or smuggled up to at least the airfields in trucks. Then they were released, so they didn't have to fire them all the way from Ukraine itself, because it's like over 4,000 kilometers away where these airfields are, and that they basically had a plot, they'd hatched a plot to have trucks drive up with these drones within a few kilometers of the airfields, then release them, control them remotely, and kamikaze drones, they strike the actual aircraft itself, managed to severely damage or destroy the object. So that is what they did. There are spectacular videos of lines of Russian aircraft in flames on the tarmac in deep inside Russia. A lot of user-generated footage by local residents who basically were obviously shocked, because the war doesn't directly affect them ever, since they're so far away from the front lines. It's kind of been, whilst there have been a lot of Ukrainian drone attacks on cities like Moscow or other cities in the European part of Russia, all the way over in Asia, they obviously have not been touched really, other than some partisan activities by Ukrainians or Ukrainian supporters in Russia. So the fact they woke up and living beside this airfield where they see these aircraft take off, and all of a sudden they are up in flames, and there were videos of the actual trucks themselves out of which the drones flew, and people were obviously pretty amazed to see that. So this is an attack that has several impacts. We don't know exactly the extent of the damage. That is hard to estimate immediately. We can see the drone footage that the Ukrainians have released, and also the user, we'll say the local resident generated content by Russians who happen to be nearby where it happened. And Ukraine is saying 33%, so 40 out of the 120 aircraft are presumably severely damaged. Whether that turns out to be the case, that, you know, which ones they were, we'll have to see in due course if we can get that intel credibly released by probably the Ukrainian side. Probably the Russians are not going to tell us what really happened. So that obviously has a significant impact. It's not going to completely change the war. Russia still has presumably another 80 aircraft that they can use. However, it is analogous with what has happened in the Black Sea, where without even a navy, because Ukraine effectively scuttled their navy at the beginning of the 2022 invasion to stop it falling into enemy hands. They were worried, particularly in Mykolaiv, the city, that their ships would be seized, so they scuttled them in port. In the end, the Ukrainians managed to defend Mykolaiv, so I guess that precautionary measure, they had to take it, obviously expecting the city to fall, but in the end, maybe they could have gotten away with not scuttling them. In any case, they have used sea drones and surface surface rockets to destroy much of the Black Sea fleet. About roughly 1/3 in terms of tonnage has already been sunk, including their flagship, the Moskva, which was right back in 2022 that it was destroyed. The sea drones basically make it very hard for Russian ships to operate in the Black Sea. They basically have to be, there are still some, I think, in Crimea, but most of it has been moved back to Novorossiysk, which is actually in Russia. So they have rendered that part of the Russian military arsenal for now ineffective. Maybe the Russians will figure out another way to use it at some point. Maybe they can, there are rumors they're going to build a port in occupied parts of Georgia, in Abkhazia, and there maybe they would be safe from sea drones and be able to use those ships. But basically they've eliminated one significant part of the Russian military from having any further impact in the war, at least for now. And this could be the start of something similar because they've taken out a large number of the airplanes. Of course, Russia still has 2/3 of it left. However, if they're able to do this once, then there's a possibility Ukraine is going to be able to repeat this at some point or find other ways to eliminate large parts of the remaining strategic bomber fleet of Russia, and that would completely end Russia's ability to use these aircraft and fire the rockets from a safe distance, basically with impunity, in terms of risking them being shot down if they can be attacked basically anywhere in Russia at this point. It doesn't look like anywhere is going to be safe, and obviously Russia is an enormous country, the biggest country geographically in the world, and it is very hard to realistically defend such a massive territory, considering that it is very sparsely populated as well. Once you get outside the European part, only 20% of the Russian population lives in 80% of the territory, which is more remote. So this is the first thing. It indicates that Ukraine, not only did they take out 40 aircraft that could have been used, that the entire strategic bomber fleet and that part of Russian aviation is now in grave danger from the Russian point of view of being taken out of the war for now. Maybe Russia figured a way to repair all this stuff, but they don't produce a lot of it anymore. So that would seem in the short, maybe even to the medium term, that is not actually a prospect. Second big impact is psychological. The fact that Russia continuously rains down these rockets on Ukrainian seas, in addition to swarms of drones. We had the biggest attack of the war on Kyiv. It was like maybe a week ago, and just regularly Russia strikes here. The fact from the Ukrainian population's point of view that they're able to strike all the way into Russia definitely raises morale. The big difference being, of course, that Ukraine struck military targets. Unfortunately, here in Ukraine, Russia very regularly strikes civilian targets. They're not really targets, just commit war crimes by hitting, deliberately hitting civilian buildings, and then obviously there's the occasional accidental hitting of civilian buildings, or when the rocket lands the debris, it can also cause damage. So that, from a psychological point of view, raises morale amongst the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, we're expecting, judged on past behavior, that Russia commits some other war crime and atrocity in response, just to show the Russian people how Russia is strong. That has been the pattern of the war. So probably in the next few nights we will see some retaliation, which won't be actually retaliation, it will just be vengeance, and presumably hit some civilian areas of Ukraine, unfortunately. But this is the nature of this war, and Russia has committed tens of thousands of war crimes and will continue to do so. Third big impact of this audacious attack is that it signals to Ukraine's allies, in particular the United States and the Trump administration, that Ukraine may have still some cards to play, to use that analogy that Donald Trump infamously used in that Oval Office spat with Volodymyr Zelensky, which took place in public. It's just still, to me, insane to think that that's what he allowed to transpire in public. And basically the US has been behaving as if Ukraine's already lost the war, or they believe that they want, I don't know if they actually want Russia to win, but they are behaving as if Ukraine basically has lost already, and they're negotiating a surrender for Ukraine, because the terms that they keep trying to pressure Ukraine to agree to are effectually a capitulation. And Ukraine is not lost on the battlefield. There is basically an impasse. The front lines have not moved significantly in the last couple of years, and there's no indication that Russia is actually capable, even if the US never gives Ukraine any more support, that Russia would actually win. So this signals to the United States and Trump administration and other allies of Ukraine that Ukraine still has significant capacity to damage Russia, not just tactically or on a small level, but also strategically, and keeping Ukraine in the fight. And actually, from Ukraine's point of view, the best case scenario is that actually there is a strategy for Ukraine to win, as defined by the goals of Vladimir Zelensky. I think it was like late 2022, including reclaiming all occupied Ukrainian territory. And the Trump administration basically was offering to recognize parts of occupied Ukraine as Russian. That would have created a particularly problematic precedent in international law, because then you'd be encouraging other leaders, not just Russia, to try and do something similar if they could get it legally recognized in the future. So all in all, this definitely signals quite strongly that the farcical peace process has been taking place. There's actually talks today in Istanbul between Ukrainian and Russian officials. Russia did not send anyone who looks like they have any sort of authority to negotiate anything, so it looks like another ginormous waste of time from that point of view, and that Vladimir Putin is just using this as part of his strategy, and he believes that overall the trajectory of war is going in his favor. So this signal will be a reminder that Ukraine has not lost and can still actually win the Russo-Ukrainian war. Doesn't mean that it is a foregone conclusion Ukraine is going to win, but they still have the advantage overall if they refuse to capitulate, because they're fighting a war of defense, whilst Russia is fighting a war of imperial expansion. And Russia is going to have to solve three problems, as I always say in my videos: manpower, material, and money. And they're going to become increasingly problematic as we go into the second half of 2025. So let me know down in the comments what you thought of this Ukrainian operation. I think it's pretty much like something out of a Hollywood film. Very futuristic use of drones targeting these Soviet-era strategic bombers, and the fact that they had the ingenuity to figure out a way to get those close to the airfields in Russia. Again, it's about 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Is pretty spectacular. Looks a little bit like a Bond-esque performance by the Ukrainian army and its special forces. So till the next video, I will say Slava Ukraini, do peremоги.